Person acting erratically. Copy that. Maintain position. Additional units when available. I turned back to the laptop, searching for more information. In a subfolder labeled Transformations, I found Jessica's notes about the physical characteristics of the creatures. They seemed to be imperfect copies, getting the general appearance right, but missing subtle details. Their behavior became more convincing over time, as if they were learning how to be human. Most importantly, Jessica had theorized that the real people might still be live somewhere, kept in a suspended state while these things used their appearances and memories to lure more victims. A loud crash from the kitchen made us both spin around. The Jessicating had thrown something through the window, a rock from the garden, shattering the glass. But it still cooled down enter because of the unbroken salt line on the windowsill. We can't stay here, I said. That thing is getting more aggressive, and we don't know if there are more of them out there. Daniel nodded grimly. What, Steplin? Wait for backup. I looked at Jessica's research spread across the laptop screen. Her maps, her theories, her careful documentation of the patterns. Every hour we wait, Jessica, the real Jessica, could be lost forever, I said. If she's in those mining tunnels, we need to find her now. Emily, think about what you're saying, Daniel replied, his voice tense. You want us to go into the forest too? Those tunnels, with these things out there? I looked out the window at the Jessican thing. It stood perfectly still and there now, watching the house, with those black eyes, waiting. We need to go while it's still daylight, I said. We have maybe 8 hours until sunset. If Jessica's right, the real victims are being held somewhere in those tunnels, and if we don't get to them soon? I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. We both knew what was at stake. Daniel looked at EML like I had suggested we jump off a cliff. Emily, that's crazy. We don't know what's out there or how many of those things exist. We know exactly what's out there. It's taken people. I pointed to the creature still watching us. From the yard, its black eyes fixed on the house, bathing wearing Jessica's face. It's not going away, and there could be others. So, your plan is to walk straight into where they come from. Daniel's voice surroged in disbelief. I turned the laptop toward him, showing Jessica's maps of the mining tunnels. She marked all the places people disappeared. They cluster around the old mine entrance. That can't be coincidence. Daniel ran a hand across his face. He looked torn between protocol and their reality. We both knew existed in Blackwood. If we wait for backup from state troopers who don't understand what's happening, more people might disappear, I said, and I don't want that Jessicating following me home. He stared at the map for another long moment, then, okay, but we do this smart. We need supplies. I smiled with relief. Salt. Lots of it. And more than that, Daniel checked his service weapon. I need to get back to the station for extra ammunition. And we need better flashlights than what you've got. I'll grab everything I can from Jessica's kitchen, I said, already moving toward the cabinets. Meet back here in 30 minutes. Make it 20. While Daniel slipped out the front door. Gun drawn as he watched for the criatura, I ransacked Jessica's kitchen. I found 2 large containers of salt and poured them into plastic bags. In her bedroom, I discovered a heavy-duty flashlight in her emergency kit along with spare batteries. I kept glancing out windows to track the Jessica thing's movements. It circled the house, testing doors and windows, its movements growing jerky. With what looked like frustration, Daniel returned in 18 minutes, carrying a duffel bag. The thing followed me halfway to the station before turning back, he said, locking the door behind him. I think it's focused on this house. He unpacked his supplies, extra ammunition for his service pistol, to police tactical flashlights, a first aid kit, walkie-talkies, and 3 large containers of rock salt. Found these at the station, he explained, holding up the salt. Old man Turner, your grandfather, convinced the town council years ago that every public building should keep some on hand. I felt a pang of gratitude for my grandfather's insistence on safety measures most people thought crazy. How do we get past that thing outside? I asked. Daniel pointed to the backyard. It's at the front door now. We can lead through the back, use the salt to create a path if it follows. We stuff its supplies into backpacks, and Daniel handed me one of the walkie-talkies. Keep this on. If we get separated, he didn't finish the sentence. We won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. We slipped out the back door, laying down a salt line behind us. The creature must have sensed our movement because it let out a sound, not quite human, not quite animal, and rushed around the side of the house. But our salt trail forced it to stay several feet away as we made our way to Daniel's police cruiser parked out front. Don't look at it, I warned as we climbed in. The Jessica thing stood in Thess Street, watching us with its black eyes and Ron's smile. Daniel started the car and accelerated away from Pine Street. In the side mirror, I saw the creature standing motionless in the middle of Therod, getting smaller as we drove off. It knows where we're going, I said. Maybe, but we'll get there first. We drove east through town toward the old logging road that led to the abandoned mining complex. Few people use that road anymore. The town had blocked it off with concrete barriers after the mine closed in the 1950s. But Daniel knew a Forest Service access point that would get us within a mile of the main entrance. As we left the town limits, I felt my stomach tighten. I'd never been this far into the eastern forest, not even during daylight. All my life, I'd followed the forest rule. Never go alone, never after dark. The trees seemed to press closer to the road here, their shadows deeper than they should be. Even in midday sun. You okay? Daniel asked, glancing at me. Just breaking a lifetime habit. He nodded in understanding. I haven't been out here in years, not since that search party for the Russell kid. I remembered that case. A 12-year-old boy who'd gone into the forest on a dare and never came back. The search party found nothing, not even tracks. Daniel parked at the end of a narrow dirt road marked Forest Service Sepercenu only. From here, we'd have to continue on foot. The mining complex was about a 15-minute hike through According to Jessica's map, we checked our supplies one last time. Daniel holstered his gun, but kept his hand near it as we started walking. The forest felt wrong. That was the only way I could describe it. The bird sounds were too sparse, the air too still. Eventhy's smell was off, like wet earth, but with something sharp and metallic underneath. There, Daniel pointed ahead after we'd walked about 10 minutes. A concrete test structure emerged from the hillside, the modern entrance to the old mining tunnels. Built over the original wood known when the company shut down operations. The heavy metal door that should have sealed the entrance hung open, its lock broken long ago. Recent footprints marked the dirt around it, coming and going in no clear pattern. Someone's been using this regularly, Daniel said, kneeling to examine the tracks. Not someone, I corrected. Something. We clicked on our flashlights and stepped into the tunnel mouth. The air grew colder immediately, carrying the smell of damp stone and something else I couldn't identify. The main passage loped downward, railway tracks still embedded in the floor, though the metal had rusted to a deep orange. Our lights revolved walls, supported by old wooden beams, many sagging under decades of pressure. Parts of the ceiling had collapsed, creating debris piles we had to climb over. Watch your step, Daniel warned as loose rocks slid under our feet. We followed the main tunnel for what felt like forever, though my watch showed only 12 minutes had passed. The passage branched, but we stuck to the primary route where the footprints were most numerous. Then I spotted something thought made me stop cold. Drag marks in the dirt, wide and continuous, as if heavy objects had been pulled along the ground. Daniel, I whispered, pointing my light at the marks. He knelt again, examining the pattern. These look recent, maybe a few days old, he nodded grimly. Probably. The thought of Jessica being dragged through these dark tunnels made my skin crawl. We continued forward, following bathed footprints and drag marks deeper into the earth. The main tunnel eventually opened into a larger area, some kind of loading station where mining carts would have been filled. Old equipment lay scattered about, rusted beyond recognition. 3 smaller tunnels branched off from this chamber. Which way? Daniel asked. I was about to suggest we check each tunnel when I heard it. A voice, faint but clear, coming from the leftmost passage. Help! Somebody help me! It was Jessica's voice. Daniel and I exchanged glances. After seeing the thing with Jessica's face at her house, we both knew this could be another trap. We go carefully, he said, drawing his gun. The left tunnel narrowed quickly, forcing us to walk single file. The drag marks were more pronounced here, cutting deep lines into the packed dirt floor. Water dripped somewhere ahead, creating a steady rhythm like a broken clock. The voice came again, closer this time. Is my own there? Please help. We emerged into another chamber. This one Largrathon, the loading station. Our flashlight beams couldn't reach the far walls or ceiling, creating the impression of standing in an endless void. But what they did illuminate made my blood freeze. 5 people sat slumped against the near wall, arranged in a semicircle. Their eyes were closed, bodies motionless, except for the shallow rise and fall of breathing. Jessica was among them, still wearing the clothes I'd last seen her in. Beside her was a man I recognized with shock, Alex Murphy, who had escaped 3 years ago. The other 3 were townspeople who had gone missing over the past decade. An older woman who had been the librarian, a teenage boy from 2 summers ago. A middle-aged Mahoney remembered as working at the gas station. All of them looked alive but unconscious, their skin pale from lack of sunlight, their bodies thin but not emaciated. Jessica Daniel rushed forward, kneeling beside her. Jessica, can you hear me? I started to follow, but stopped when I noticed movement in the darkness beyond our light beams. Something was shifting in the shadows. Something that didn't make a sound as it moved. Daniel, I hissed. We're not alone. I unslung my backpack and pulled out the salt containers. With shaking hands, I began pouring a thick line in a circle around 5 captives and Daniel, moving as quickly as I could. They won't wake up, Daniel said, checking Jessica's pulse, but they're alive, all of them. As Missiled Circle neared completion, the shadows at the edges of the chamber seemed to deepen. I heard a sound like fabric dragging across stone. Then, another that resembled whispers just below the threshold of understanding. Hurry, Daniel urged, drawing his gun again and pointing it toward the darkness. I finished the salt circle just as the first of them emerged into our flashlight beams. It wore Alex Murphy's face, but wrong, the features too perfect, too symmetrical. Behind it came another wearing the librarian's appearance. Then one with the gas station attendant's face. Each moved with that same unsettling stiffness I'd seen in the Jessica thing at the house. More shapes behind them, dozens of them, each wearing the face of someone who had gone missing in Blackwood over the years. Some I recognized from old photographs or missing person flyers. Others were as strangers to me. Oh God, I whispered, they've been doing this for decades. The creatures stopped at the edge of our light, forming a loose circle around us. Each had those same black eyes, empty pools, that reflected nothing, not even our flashlight beams. One stepped forward, the false Jessica. Its mouth opened in that too wide smile. Emily, it said in Jessica's voice, though the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. You shouldn't have come here. Another spoke, this one wearing Alex's face. This place isn't for you. The voice was Alex's, but overlaid with something else. A second voice speaking the same words, a fraction of a second later. Then, they all began speaking, a cacophony of familiar and unfamiliar voices. Some overlapping, some Phoenician Jeech, other sentences. You belong up there in the light. We belong down here in the dark with our collection. The false. Jessica took another step toward our salt circle, but now you can join them. It reached out a hand toward its salt line, not touching it, but hovering just above. The other creatures did the same, surrounding our circle completely, testing for weaknesses. Daniel kept his gun trained on the false Jessica, though we both knew bullets probably wouldn't stop these things. What do they want? He whispered to me. I stared at the 5 unconscious people behind us, then at the dozens of creatures wearing human faces. And the horrible truth clicked into place. They're collecting, I said, taking people and copying them somehow, using their forms to get more victims. The creatures had completely surrounded our salt circle. Now they began moving all around it, maintaining perfect distance from the barrier. Their black eyes never blinked. Their movements grew more fluid as they circled, as if they were learning to move better just by watching us. Emily Turner, several voices said at once. We've been waiting for you to break the rules. The creatures continued their slow circle around us, their movements becoming more fluid with each rotation, as if they were learning from watching us. Their black eyes never left us as they tested the salt line for any break or weakness. I clutched the nearly empty salt container to my chest, watching as some of the creatures, the false Alex, reached toward our barrier. Its hand hovered just above, the white granules not quite touching. A low hiss escaped its mouth when it got too close. They can't cross it, I whispered to Daniel. But I don't know how long it will hold them back. Daniel knelt beside Jessica, checking her pulse again. We need to wake him up. If we can get him moving, we might have a chance to escape. I joined him, shaking Jessica's shoulders gently. Jessica, can you hear me? Her head lolled to the side, but her eyelids fluttered. A good sign. Try Alex, I suggested, moving to check on the librarian and the teenage boy. Daniel grabbed Alex's shoulders and spoke loudly near his ear. Alex Murphy, wake up. Alex's eyes opened suddenly. Normal human eyes, not the black pulsef. The creatures? He looked around in confusion, his gaze unfocused. What? Where am I? His voice was hoarse, barely audible. You're in the old mining tunnels? Daniel explained, keeping his tone calm, despotith creatures circling us. You've been missing for 3 years. Alex's eyes brightened. 3 years. I watched the creatures as Daniel worked to fully wake Alex. Their circling had become more agitated, faster. The false Jessica kept twitching toward the salt line, pulling back each time with that same hissing sound. It was testing the barrier, looking for a way through. I turned my attention back to Jessica, tapping her face lightly. Jessica, wake up. We need to go. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against our flashlight beams. Emily? Yes, it's me. We found you? You were right about the mining tunnels. Recognition dawned on her face, followed by fear. The things in the forest, bueno, I cut in. They're here all around us. Jessica struggled to sit up straighter, looking past me at the circling creatures. I saw her eyes lock onto her doppelganger and she let out a small cry of shock. That's me, just a copy, I assured her. A bad one. We managed to wake the teenage boy Aswell, though the older woman and the gas station attendant remained unconscious. Despite our efforts, the three who were awake were weak, barely able to move without help. The creatures had picked up their pace, moving faster around us. I noticed with growing horror that the salt line was thinning in places. Whether from the creature's influence or just the natural spread of granules on the uneven ground, I couldn't tell. "Daniel," I whispered, nodding toward a spot where the line looked dangerously thin. "We're losing the barrier." He saw it, too, and reached for his salt container, but found it empty. I checked mine. "Just a handful left. We need more salt," he said, scanning the chamber with his flashlight. The beam caught something in the corner, off the room. An old mining cart, half filled with what looked like white rocks. I squinted at it, trying to make out the details from across the chamber. I started rock salt, Daniel confirmed, his voice rising with hope. The miners used it to melt ice in the tunnels during winter. The cart sat about 20 feet from our circle near what looked like the main entrance to this chamber. If we could reach it, we might have enough salt to create a path all the way back to the surface. "We need a plan," I said, keeping my voice low. "That salt line won't hold forever." Daniel nodded, thinking, I could try to make a break for it, get to the cart, and bring some back. "They'd surround Jiao before you made it halfway," I said. "But what if we extend our circle?" I showed him the small amount of salt I had left. "If I pour this in a path, you to follow it to the cart, then bring back enough to reinforce our circle and create an escape route." The creature sensed we were planning something. They moved even faster now, their whispers growing louder. The false Jessica pressed closer to the salt line, its black eyes fixed on me. "Don't leave us," Alex pleaded weakly. "We'll be right back," Daniel assured him. "Just stay inside the circle." I took a deep breath and began carefully pouring a thin salt line from our circle toward the cart, trying to make my limited supply stretch as far as possible. The creatures followed my movement, gathering on the side where I was working. "Ready?" I asked Daniel when the line extended about 5 feet from our circle. He drew his gun and nodded. "Go." I continued pouring, walking backwards slowly while Daniel followed right behind me, keeping his weapon trained on the nearest creatures. They hissed and backed away from the extending salt line, but kept pace with us, looking for any gap. Halfway to the cart, my container ran empty. I shook the last few granules onto the ground, creating a line that almost reached the cart but fell short by about 3 feet. "I'm out," he whispered to Daniel. Without hesitating, he handed me his gun and pulled off his uniform shirt, revealing a whitened shirt beneath. He twisted the shirt into a rope-like shape and tossed one end across the gap, landing it in the mining cart among the rocks. "Salt. Pull some onto the shirt," he instructed. I tucked the gun into my waistband and reached out, carefully tugging on the shirt to gather rock salt onto the fabric. When I pulled it back, a trail of white granules fell across the gap, completing our path to the cart. "That worked," I grinned at Daniel, handing back his gun. We reached the cart, which held more rock salt than I dared hope for. Enough to create a secure path back to our trapped companions and potentially all the way to the surface. "You get the others?" Daniel said, already scooping handfuls of rock salt. "I'll block these things in." I nodded and started laying down a thick salt line, back to our circle, where Jessica, Alex, and the boy watched with whiteys. The creatures grew more agitated as they realized what we were doing, moving faster and making those awful whisper sounds that almost formed words. When I reached the circle, I poured a heavy line around it, reinforcing the barrier. "Can any of you walk?" I asked. Jessica nodded weakly. "I think so. With help?" "What about the others?" A glance at the still unconscious woman and man. Alex looked at them sadly. "They haven't moved since I've been awake." I looked back at Daniel, who was systematically blocking tunnels and passageways with thick lines of salt. The creatures retreated from each barrier, moving deeper into the mine. "Daniel, we need to carry 2 of them," I called. He jogged back to us, pocket sand, hands full of rocks. "I've blocked the 3 main tunnels. They're trapped deeper in the complex for now." Together, we helped Jessica, Alex, and the boy to their feet. They were unsteady, but determined. Daniel lifted the unconscious woman in a fireman's carry, while I struggled with the gas station attendant, managing a clumsy but effective hold. "Follow the salt line," I instructed the others. "Don't step off it, not even an inch." We moved slowly down the main tunnel toward the surface. Behind us, the creatures began making new sounds, not whispers anymore, but high-pitched shrieks that bounced off the stone walls. The noise grew louder as we continued our escape, as if they realized we were taking their collection. "Faster," Daniel urged, adjusting the woman on his shoulders. "I don't think they'll stay trapped for long." We shuffled along as quickly as our weakened companions could manage. Jessica kept stumbling, but Alex held her up, showing surprising strength for someone who'd been captive for 3 years. The tunnel sloped upward, making our progress even slower. My arms OCD from carrying the unconscious man, but I pushed through the pain. Daylight appeared ahead, a pale glow at the end of the main shaft. Almost there, I encouraged everyone just a little further. A particularly loud shriek echoed through the tunnels, closer than the others. I glanced back and saw movement in the darkness behind us. "They're coming," I gasped. "Daniel, we need more salt." He was already pulling more from his pockets, awkwardly, creating a thicker line behind us with one hand while supporting the woman with his other arm. The creatures came into view, 3 of them moving together, including the false Jessica. They stopped at Daniel's fresh salt line, shrieking in what sounded like rage. We finally reached the mine entrance, practically spilling out into the sunlight. I laid the gas station attendant on the ground, my arms shaking from exertion, and turned to help the others. Severian was outside. Daniel created one final thick salt line across Centrons. From deep within the tunnels, dozens of inhuman voices shrieked in unison, a sound of fury and frustration that made my skin crawl. The creatures were trapped, at least for now. "We need to seal this place," Daniel said, breathing hard from the effort of carrying the woman. "Later," I replied, checking on our rescued people. "Right now, we need to get them to a doctor." The trip back to town was slow and difficult. We made a stretcher for the gas station attendant using branches in our jackets, while Daniel continued to carry the woman. The others walked on their own with frequent breaks. When we finally reached Daniel's ballless cruiser, we carefully loaded everyone inside and drove back to town, where the local clinic took the victims in immediately. Dr. Martinez asked no questions when Daniel explained they had been trapped in the mine. In Blackwood, the less said about such things, the better. While Daniel contacted state authorities about permanently sealing the mining complex, I stayed with Jessica and the others at clinic. They were severely dehydrated and malnourished, but otherwise physically unharmed. The mental impact of their ordeal would take longer to assess. 3 years, Alex kept saying, looking at these hands as if they belonged to someone else. I was down there for 3 years, and I don't remember any of it. None of them remembered anything after being taken, just darkness, then waking up when we found them. Jessica sat on the edge of her hospital bed, sipping water slowly. "You saved my life," she said when I checked on her. "I should have listened to you about the curfew." "You couldn't have known," I replied, though part of him wanted to say, "I told you so." "I know now," she said firmly, "and I'm not leaving Blackwood." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "You're staying after what, the pun?" She nodded. "Someone needs to warn other newcomers." "Really, warn them, not just mention some vague town rule." Her eyes met mine with newfound determination. "Those things are still down there behind salt barriers that might not hold forever. People need to understand the danger." She was right. Our town had grown too comfortable with hints and vague warnings, assuming people would either figure things out or leave. It wasn't enough anymore. Later, that venting, after everyone was stable and resting, Alex asked to speak with me privately. His face looked gaunt in the harsh clinic lighting, but his eyes were clear. "Emily," he said, taking my hand in high nibbling one. "Thank you. I don't know how long I would have stayed down there if you hadn't come looking." I squeezed his hand gently. "I wasn't even looking for you specifically. I only went after Jessica. But you found all of us." He smiled weakly. "That's the thing about town. We don't talk about the danger enough, but when someone breaks the rules, we still try to save them." Daniel returned from the police station with news that state officials would arrive tomorrow to assess the mining complex and begin sealing operations. He'd convinced them it was a safety hazard due to structural instability, never mentioning what really lived inside. As I walked home that evening, well before sunset, I thought about how our community handled the danger that surrounded us. For generations, we'd protected ourselves with silence and rules, passing down warnings without explanations. It had kept most of you safe, but at the cost of those who didn't believe quickly enough. Jessica was right. We needed to do better, not just with salt lines and curfews, but with honest conversations about what lurked in our forest. The rules weren't enough if people didn't understand why they existed. Tomorrow, I would talk to the town council about creating a proper orientation for newcomers. No more vague warnings or hoping they'd learn in time. If people were going to live in Blackwood, they deserved to know what they were living with and what waited in the darkness if they broke the rules.